A very good evening to you folks. Welcome to this fireside chat, a conversation about creating a more compassionate world. My name is Dan Richardson. I'm very honoured to host this evening's discussion, and I'm an actor, a filmmaker, sort of a hobbyist photographer, among a few other things. And it's my honour to be a patron or an ambassador for a number of animal charities. And in my work in that area of animal welfare and conservation, I have had the great good fortune of crossing paths with the likes of my two friends and fellow fireside chatters this evening, who I'd love to introduce to you or to have them introduce themselves to you. And I'll start with Philip Lymbery.
Hi, Dan. Thanks so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be with you tonight. And so my name is Philip Lymbery. I'm the Chief Executive of Compassion in World Farming, which is a leading international farmed animal welfare organization. And essentially, our mission is to end factory farming for animals, both farmed and wild, as well as people and the planet. It's as simple as that. And we see compassion as being the heart of a decent world going forward. It's about justice for animals, about justice for people, and justice for the environment. And if we create that, then we create a better living future for all of us. Dan, I think you may be on mute.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
There, you're back now.
Thank you for the nudge. Yeah. See, I was just saying to the guys, I teach people how to use this technology, and I just left myself on mute.
Right.
I just also want to introduce you to another dear friend, a flag bearer in everything related to compassion, Mr. Peter Egan.
Hello, hi Dan, and hello, Philip. Yes, well, my name is Peter Egan. I am a very mature actor, been at it for a long time, but I like to describe myself now really as both an actor and perhaps first and foremost at this time in my life, an animal advocate. And like Philip, I see very much my role in life to share a concern, a compassionate concern for our planet and all the various wonderful creatures that share it with us.
I'm on mute again. Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Philip. Thank you both. And thanks for joining me this evening. And guys, to all of you who are joining us, thank you for being here. And we welcome your questions. We really do encourage you to ask any questions you have. And I want to tell you that there's no such thing as a silly question. We would really love for you to be involved in this discussion. It's a very informal chat between friends and fellow animal advocates and people to whom compassion is of primary importance. So with that, perhaps we should start by talking about what compassion means to us. And I'll just throw it in there myself, is that compassion for me is something that's not species specific, so that everyone and everything benefits from it. So the more we can do to live from a place of compassion, the more everything and everyone benefits. Gentlefolk, what's compassion mean to you?
Well, I think exactly the same. And the first thing I'd like to say, Dan, is what an absolute privilege it is to be here with you, to be here with Peter, two heroes of the animal movement. And thank you so much for joining tonight, having me along for this fireside chat. And it's wonderful to be exploring, what does compassion mean? Compassion means empathy. It means to suffer with. And if we take that starting point, that compassion in its literal sense is to suffer with, then it is about connecting with the suffering of others and wanting to do something about it, wanting to stop their suffering, stop their hurting, and to give them the joy of life. So that's why I get up in the morning, and I know that that's a similar theme for you both.
Absolutely, I would absolutely 100% agree with both of your very eloquent interpretation of compassion. I kind of walked into the room marked compassion very, very specifically, because I always thought that I was a compassionate person because I loved my dogs. But I didn't realize until I actually got truly involved with animal rights and animal welfare about 15 years ago that I had a very selective compassion. My compassion was a very singular one. And once I walked into the room that really had a neon light going on and off, saying real dimensioned compassion, did I understand that I had not joined up all the dots. And that is, as you say, Dan, that we share this wonderful planet with so many different species. And compassion doesn't mean that I love my dog. It means that I love this planet and I love every single species that I share this planet with. And in getting into that territory myself, and it was very much initiated for me, firstly by watching a film called Earthlings, which in the most amazing way visually describes the appalling conditions and slaughter involved in industrialized animal agriculture. When I saw that film, and that would be yes, about 14 years ago, I remember sitting in my kitchen in North London, where we lived at the time, with my late wife Myra. She came into the room after I had just finished the film, and she said, "Peter, what's the matter with you?" And I said, I'm literally in a state of shock. I've just watched the most devastating film of my entire life, and I am never, ever going to touch animal product ever again. And I haven't since that time. And that was the room that I walked into. That is the room that describes to me what real compassion and what dimension compassion is.
So true. And for the record, I got 16 or 17 minutes into Earthlings and sobbing uncontrollably, had to switch off. And I don't say that irresponsibly. I say it because I guess I was already there and I was watching it because I thought it was important, but it wasn't going to change me. But I'd love to know from you folks watching because obviously you being here indicates that you too share our love of animals and all species and life and live from a place of compassion. And I'm curious to know what your journey's been to get there. So let us know in the comments if you wouldn't. Peter,
just chuck in one thing, if I may, before. But a thing that also went deep into my heart was compassion for other humans. It was something that affected me so completely, and clearly it was directed towards the brutality in industrialized animal agriculture and the poor things that happen to animals. But I have found that I am much more understanding and sympathetic to humans as well as a result of this journey that I find myself on.
It comes back to what I mentioned before about it's not species specific. Everyone in society, imagine a society that prioritizes love, compassion, kindness, empathy. Who and what wouldn't benefit from that? And human beings being the first, of course. And Peter, I'll never forget watching, talking about these harrowing videos and films that I imagine have converted so many. I'll never forget the journey you took to, I think it was South Korea, to the dog meat farms over there. And I've never seen a person look so broken as you did when you delivered a video message from there, having seen what you saw. It's very similar impact that Earthlings had.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that trip was horrific, and indeed going to Indonesia, to the extreme markets in Indonesia, I found that was something I will never ever forget. One of my dogs is going to start making a noise in a minute, so I can just tell it's Pippa. You might be able to hear it in a second. Come here. There you are.
As a fellow dog lover, Peter.
Shush.
As people who know me know that my great inspiration is our rescue dog Duke. And speaking as someone who has made it their mission in life, to go and see as many different dimensions of factory farming for themselves, because I believe if you see it, then you can describe it, talk about it, be more passionate and effective about it. As someone who's done all of that, I just haven't been able to bring myself to go to the kind of dog markets that I know that you've seen. I just don't know how you did that, and hats off to you for doing that.
I have to say I was very much inspired by a most wonderful young woman called Lola Webber, who works for Humane Society International, and she works outside out of Bali. And she was very much engaged with the dog meat trade, stopping it in South Korea, and also in terms of Indonesia. But it was horrendous. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm going to switch this off. I thought I'd turned the sound down on that, but obviously I haven't. And shush, Pippa. But let me just say, talking about dogs, you see, that does it. I was so inspired, Philip, by reading your trilogy, Farmageddon, Dead Zone, and now 60 Harvests Left. And I would certainly say to anyone who's watching tonight and is interested in our planet and interested in compassion in the way that you have so beautifully described it, they should read your books, because they will understand entirely how shocking and how destructive and how bad, not only for our planet, but for we humans living on this planet. They will get a very, very comprehensive understanding by reading the 3 books, which are beautifully written, I hasten to add. So I congratulate you.
Thank you, Peter. Well, I just thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I would agree wholeheartedly, by the way. I've got a question here from Talking Dogs and Writing Blogs, which is a fantastic handle. I think I know who it is. Ariana, hello. When did you realize, to both of you gentlemen, when did you realize you're going to fight animal causes?
Peter, go. When did you start?
Well, I started rescuing dogs with my wife 35 years ago. That happened because we'd already got a dog, a black Labrador called Crackers, and a blonde Labrador, quite elderly, fell and collapsed in front of my wife on the Chiswick High Road. And my wife brought it home, and realizing that, and took this wonderful dog to the vet. And I at the time said, "Look, Myra, we've got a dog. We don't need another dog." And Myra said, "Well, this dog hasn't got a home." And so the dog sat in our kitchen, and for some reason it knew it had to focus on me. So whenever I was sitting down at the table, this dog would sit at my knee and look me straight in the eye, these big brown eyes just looking at me there. And we decided to call the blonde labby Custard. So we had Crackers and Custard. And I suddenly, Custard was such a wonderfully warm old dog, and obviously I imagine lost. That's Sebastian who's now doing that. It's my German Shepherd Husky cross, and so Custard obviously had lost his companions, the people who were looking after him. They may have been elderly and died, because he was used to being in a home, and so he told me that I should adopt him, or I should make him my companion. Which we did as a family, of course. And he was so incredibly rewarding alongside Crackers. They got on so well together. That kind of opened the first door for me before the major door that I've already talked about. But that was the first door that opened to me. And in walking these 2 wonderful dogs, we moved just opposite Hampstead Heath at a time in our lives. And I met so many people on Hampstead Heath who had rescued dogs. And then I became involved with All Dogs Matter, great charity in North London, which I was in at from the beginning, and have been a trustee and a founder and a patron for I don't know, 15 years. So it was a kind of piggybacking of events that kind of led me into it. But I think quite remarkably by two wonderful Labradors.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
What about you, Philip?
Well, I've always had a fascination for animals and wildlife, particularly birds. I had that since I was a small child. I used to always love to go to my granddad's home in Bedford and feed the birds there. And he had blue tits going in and out of a nest box and things of that nature. And that really set me on a course. I wanted to be a conservationist, which is why I still have a big fascination for nature. But in my teens, I remember having someone come into our school from an organization I'd never heard of before, called Compassion in World Farming. And this person put on a video called Don't Look Now, Here Comes Your Dinner, which talked about how chickens and pigs and veal calves were being kept in those days in horrendous factory farms. And that was a real awakening for me. And then I read Peter Singer's book, Animal Liberation, and that really galvanized me to get involved, firstly by getting involved in local grassroots protests, then starting my own organization. And then eventually I met Peter Roberts, the founder of Compassion in World Farming, which essentially squared a circle, if you like. And I went there for a job, and I didn't get the job. I got a phone call the next day saying, I'm sorry, you haven't got the skills and experience, so we can't give you this job, but we recognize something in you, and we'd like to create a job for you at a different level, actually at a junior level. We want you to just come and be an assistant to Peter Roberts. And I jumped at the chance. And
Wonderful.
Here I am 33 years later, still plugging away with Compassion in World Farming.
Amazing. That's fantastic. Really fantastic, Philip.
And pivotal in such incredibly important changes that have taken place over the years as well. So thank you for everything you do. There's a lot of comments in the chat here saying thank you to you guys, because you are both extraordinary.
You've frozen, I think, Dan.
Why?
Did you freeze just then?
I'm actually too warm.
You were obviously concentrating that. I should just chuck in while we have a pause. I'm also very, very, very proud to be a patron of Compassion in World Farming, and Philip has been remarkably instructive to me. I think I've been a patron now for about 12 or 13 years, haven't I?
It's been a fair while, yeah.
It's 10 years, certainly, yeah.
I'm not sure exactly, but 10 years sounds about right. And we're always eternally grateful to you, Peter. It's wonderful to have you by our side. And Dan, your friendship is incredibly important to us. Thank you.
Likewise, it's mutual. And I always find these things so, as well as so important and interesting, I find them reassuring, to be talking to people like yourselves who make me feel like there's hope, that the world is a better place, because it can get quite dark sometimes. And I know that this is something that, in fact, it's a conversation I had with another charity that I was on a call with earlier today about something of which you'll be very familiar as compassion fatigue, which is something that I think is really important to talk about. And in so much as the wonderful quote from Buddha that if your compassion doesn't include yourself, then it's incomplete. And I think as we talk about compassion this evening, it's important to remember you, and I mean you, everyone watching and anyone watching this subsequently, we have to be compassionate to ourselves as well.
Yes, absolutely right. And you're quite right to mention that, Dan. And I mean, we all suffer from compassion fatigue. I think it's very, very important to recognize it. And when you're feeling it, and the feeling is very, very clearly one of deep, deep depression, is to acknowledge it and just to sit down for a while and say, I'm in this pit now, and I'm going to come out of it. When that happens to me, once I've recognize the fact that I'm in the pit. What helps me climb out of it is identifying various animals that are in a worse position than I am. And that helps me climb out of that compassion fatigue area. Also, I mean, I've as you mentioned, South Korea, and my extended or dimension compassion embraces so many other species. Like I'm mad about moon bears and now rhinoceros as well. I just had the greatest experience in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, where for a charity called Helping Rhinos, and on the day that I arrived at their orphanage, a 1-week-old rhino came in to the orphanage, and it was just breathtaking to be able to be in not touching it physically, but to be in close contact with a prehistoric creature. It was just absolutely amazing. And to, again, on these, to use this word we use, sentience, to see the fact that this little baby, you could see the sentience just oozing out of this 1-week-old who had been rejected by its mother. And
amazing.
It was wonderful. It was, but another thing is, sorry, I don't want to hog conversation here, but we are in a very, very dangerous time, I think, at the moment, because our government has moved very much towards being very un-animal friendly. And with the rejection recently of the Animals Abroad bill, which they finally ditched because of, I think, a few of the hunting, shooting MPs who want to keep their hobby going, their hobby of actually killing animals. And also this hijacking of what they now use as a get out of jail card, which is to say, oh, I'm not getting involved with that woke stuff. And they abuse the most magnificent word, which is woke, which has its origins in 1920s civil rights in America. And it stems from, as I'm sure you both know, I awoke to the problem, wake up to the problem, be woke. And it is a very, very, very serious and passionate and important word, which I find it drives me mad when I see various MPs and certainly lots of American senators and congressmen say, "Oh, we're in woke issues," and they have hijacked the term so that they can escape. They don't even know what they're talking about. And if you ask them, "What do you mean by woke?" they can't tell you. They think it's think it's to do with left liberalism.
Yeah,
you know.
And I think that what they're doing, to be honest, my view is that they're using this as an excuse to just carry on focusing on short-termism, on self-interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all of that, Peter, is going to get swept away very soon. This is what gives me a great deal of hope, is that big change is inevitable. Peter, Dan, we've talked about this before, that factory farming is a major driver of so many ills. It's the biggest cause of animal cruelty on the planet. It's a major driver of wildlife declines, of ecosystem collapse. It's integral to impending climate change, and it's also the biggest waster of food on the planet, growing huge amounts of human edible crops and feeding them to factory farmed animals who waste most of it in the process. In terms of conversion to meat, milk and eggs, in that equation, we waste enough food to feed half the people on the planet. What we know is that it also undermines the soil, and hence the title 60 Harvests Left of the most recent book that we touched on. And what that means is that big change is inevitable. This cannot go on. Climate change, collapse of nature, diminishing soils. This is not a viable future. So denying wokeism, denying social justice for people, for animals, for the environment, will very soon be a thing of the past by absolute necessity.
Well, that would be wonderful. I I hope I live long enough to see all of that. It's yeah, absolutely, 100%. It's very
I think it's coming pretty soon, Peter. It's
you.
coming soon.
Good,
Yeah.
good. I
Well,
hope.
to quote Joe Biden, the US president, of course, he
Mhm.
talks about this being the decisive decade to
Yeah,
2030. And by 2030, we start to hit tipping points around climate, around collapse of nature, and those accelerate through to 2040. So that big change is going to happen. Is going to have to happen
yeah,
on a time span of years. So the things which the government is doing, pushing away the reforms that it promised for animals abroad, pushing away the ban on live exports that the government promised in
yeah,
its
absolutely.
manifesto.
Mhm.
And it said that this was one of the things, that one of the positives that would come out of Brexit.
Yeah,
And there they are backing away from it. It is absolutely appalling. And
yeah,
we have to hold them to account.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
branding anything that is compassionate, kind, and about justice as woke and therefore somehow diminished is frankly a ridiculous and foolhardy approach.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, and you articulate that beautifully, Philip. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree too. And on that note, I think again a number of questions in the chat. And folks, forgive me if I'm not getting to your questions. There's a lot of them coming through, which is wonderful. Keep them coming. How can people help? Because right, and obviously the answer to that question is endless. There's numerous ways you can help, endless ways you can help, but one perhaps related directly to the things we just talked about. So Peter, I know I retweeted a tweet that you put out earlier today with regards to one of those backward moves the government has just made regarding animal welfare, things like that, and signing petitions and getting behind campaigns to stop these things from happening. Is there anything you guys can share that you're actively involved in right now that people can put their name to petition wise and things like that?
Well, I would say one thing, first of all, in terms of people say, how can I help? I think they can help enormously by remaining committed. I think a lot of people get very, very upset about a certain issue and share it, or I use this term loosely, I don't mean it to be insulting, but shout about it for a bit, and then they feel they've done something and they let it go. So the first thing I would say, and I say this a lot to people that I talk to, if you really, really want to help, stay committed, keep at it, keep sharing, keep protesting, keep supporting. It may be that you want to find one charity that you are really devoted to that actually speaks the language you understand. Stay with that charity, help it as much as you can. Don't ever give up. Don't be put off. Don't be dismayed. Don't give up. Remain committed.
Very,
I think
very
that's
good.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right, Peter. And
Philip,
of course,
to you on that one as well. I'm going to share this question on the screen, but you carry on, please, Philip.
sure. Well, I would, of course, encourage everyone, as Peter says, to get behind a charity or charities, to sign up to campaign newsletters. Of course, at Compassion in World Farming, CIWF.org, we are constantly giving people tools and the means to make their voice heard, be that at government level or corporations or the United Nations. So Compassion in World Farming is currently running campaigns to get the UK government to stick to its promise to not back away from banning live animal exports, to also make sure that we ban cages for chickens and pigs. We're running that campaign in the UK. We're running that campaign, a campaign called End the Cage Age in Europe, in the EU, where the Commission, we got more than 1 million signatures together from people across Europe, and the European Commission responded by committing itself to ban all cages for animals farmed for food. So that would be a big win. We're two or 3 years more of parliamentary process to go through. So please stick with us on that. As I say, CIWF.org. the other campaign that we've got running at the moment is a new campaign targeting world leaders, and it's simply called End It. End It. And this is about ending factory farming in its entirety before factory farming ends us.
Absolutely, absolutely. I saw a little link come up just now, someone talking about how this woke issue that comes up with local councils and stuff like that, and changing attitudes in terms of school meals. That's the one from Linda Newbury. I'm also a patron for the Interfaith Alliance, and there is a group there, and this is not ecclesiastic, this is just nuts and bolts, as it were, that they are working very closely with schools, trying to introduce vegan alternatives in schools in a very serious way. I'm not suggesting Linda doesn't do it in a serious way as well, but this is a very good example of how people are using the woke reaction so as they don't have to deal with it. And also, the moment you mention vegan or plant-based to a lot of people, they throw their hands up in the air and run away thinking you're trying to poison them. They don't realize just how exciting the vegan plant-based movement is in terms of the variety of exciting and interesting food you can eat that is not destructive. There's no murder on the plate. It's delicious. I mean, there are so many food cultures that it embraces. And one of the things I found in the time that I've been vegan is that I never ever, when I finished a meal, I never ever feel bloated or tired. I feel much more energized, which is a great thing, I have to say, at my age. Rather than wanting to go to sleep, I want to do something. And so Linda Newbury, keep at it. Don't be put off by the woke reaction. Just keep pushing the envelope or supporting groups that are. Look up the Interfaith Alliance and you'll see that they are doing and trying to do remarkable things in the curriculum in schools in terms of food.
Well, not wishing to steal another quote from somebody a whole lot brighter and more compassionate than me, but I'm reminded when you talk about that, Peter, and there's so many issues that are ongoing right now where we're seeing a different kind of reaction from people. Trophy hunting is a good example, where the hunting lobby and the hunting community, the pro-hunt community, I mean, I was attacked recently like I've never been attacked before, and our dear friend Dominic Dyer is constantly being attacked in that way. And what Linda's describing there, to me, speaks of a wonderful quote from Gandhi, which related to any cause, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
Yeah.
And to me, what we're experiencing right now is the fight part of it, and we know what comes next. And I think that's why they're fighting, is because they're threatened, and that's good. So we have to keep our foot on the gas, the electric, not the gas, just as you said, Peter.
Yes, absolutely. But also there is an element, and this may either shock certain people, but there is a terrific correlation between those people who want to kill animals, the trophy hunters, and want to have their trophies. They are so closely allied to serial killers that they are actually psychopathic, because they want to keep a memento of something they have destroyed. It's absolutely shocking. So I, like you, I am attacked, as indeed is our friend Chris Packham. You know, everyone who actually fights that movement is attacked. And I'm very often called. They say, well, "You're an old actor. What do you know about it anyway?" You know,
always. It's such a diversion. It's pathetic, and it will constantly happen. And again, I see it as an indication that we're doing the right things, because we seem to rattle these folks. I've shared Philippa's point, and I want to add to it. Philippa is saying support Viva and other organisations like that: the Vegan Society, World Land Trust, Sea Shepherds, Save the Elephants, Compassion in World Farming, and the list goes on. List goes on. We could all name charities all day long, and of course, one of the things I think is so important is to know that you're supporting charities that are doing good, effective work. And with that in mind, where there's too much to cover in this conversation, you'll see along the bottom the ticker that I've got Peter's and Philip's and my own Twitter accounts. You will find us constantly sharing about campaigns that can be trusted, on which the due diligence has been done. So please, if nothing else, follow us. And there's the likes of Viva that Philippa mentions, the likes of Compassion in World Farming, of course. You can absolutely trust and depend upon to be doing good work, and transparently so you can see where your money's being spent. And don't give up, as Peter said, stick with it, because we're getting there. We really are getting there. We have to celebrate those victories.
Yes, absolutely.
Really must.
Yeah. Well, Juliet Galatly, who runs Viva, has been a big inspiration for me since the 1980s. She was originally at the Vegetarian Society, and my little local group, which was called Leighton Buzzard Animal Action up in Bedfordshire, we were affiliated with the Vegetarian Society. So I learned a lot from Julia in those formative years. Yeah. But there are many organizations, as you say, and it's a privilege to, one of the big pluses of working in this field is meeting so many committed people from different organizations. It's been one of my pleasures this week, as we were talking about off air, to be in Brussels and for the annual conference of Eurogroup for Animals, which is a federation of 85, 90 organizations committed to ending animal cruelty across Europe and beyond. And it was great to feel. We had 300 people in the room. It was great to feel the energy and the enthusiasm, the determination in that room. It was incredible.
Marvelous, wonderful.
That really is wonderful to hear. And actually, I just saw Patricia's message that you'll see on screen now. What stops you from being overwhelmed and giving up? And of course, that's what we were kind of talking about as it happened anyway. And Peter mentioned earlier on about and we were talking about compassion fatigue, and Peter talks about his method of getting out of that pit of compassion fatigue, or I saw empathy erosion that someone said earlier on, which is a great phrase too. And I will tell you my way. Well, I'll be completely honest with you, because I think it's really important to. I do get overwhelmed, so I won't pretend, Patricia, that I am able to stop myself from getting overwhelmed. I just will never give up. And the way I had to ask the advice myself, and I remember asking two of my dear friends, who most, if not all of you will know, Will Travers and his mother, Virginia McKenna, I should say Dame Virginia McKenna, who, of course, have dedicated their lives to the causes that we're talking about. And I asked the very same question, Patricia, is how do you, and I asked it in the midst of one of my dips into that fatigue, into that depression, and the answer that came from both of them was exactly what I just mentioned about celebrating those victories, because they're there, and it's a really important part of the mindset that we have to employ, which is that it can seem insurmountable, and I realize that, and it's not. We're winning victories left, right, and centre. It's perhaps one of the biggest flaws in the conservation and animal welfare movement is the fact that I think, and rightly so in one way, because we need to be on to the next thing that needs addressing. But I think we should probably spend a bit more time focusing on the things we have achieved in order to engender that kind of sense of we can do this. And one more thing I'll say is I have a lot of, you'll probably think I'm quite weird saying this. This is a little piece of blue lace agate is a little crystal that I hold. I've got a number of crystals. I meditate a lot, and I associate various things with the various crystals. And this one, I associate love and compassion with this, and I hold it in my hand. I've just had it in my hand the whole time we're talking, because it means that to me. And I mention it simply because perhaps you can endow an object. This is something Peter will know about with acting. It's a technique in acting as well, where you can endow an object with meaning and to evoke certain emotions and feelings. And this is my love and compassion crystal, and I hold it because I feel like I need to be grounded in that. And I need to be grounded in it because of the fact that we're pulled from it so often. Because it gets dark out there. It really does. And I think that's anything you need to do, Patricia, anything to stop yourself getting overwhelmed, tips from other folks like this, and whatever you feel helps you, is an effective way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I would agree with that, Dan.
What do you do, Philip?
What I do is I focus on the vision. I focus on the beautiful, life-affirming future that we are going to create, that we are creating for animals and ourselves. So that's what keeps me going, and which sounds abstract, but then I also I bring the animals into the room. I focus not just on the long-term vision that we're trying to achieve, but I focus Duke, on Duke, my dog, our rescue dog. I look into his eyes. I see the way he runs. I see that he looks like a pig, like a piglet when he runs. His floppy ears. I see how I see our hens, our rescue hens, out here in the garden, and I look into their eyes. I look into their eyes, and through them, I see the vision of the beautiful, life-affirming, compassionate world that we are creating together, and that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah,
It's beautiful. It is beautiful. Tell us what keeps you going, folks. As I said, this is as much about you as it is about us, and we want you to be part of this conversation. Tell us what you do. And Rebecca just shared a beautiful message in that very vein. So I think we have to focus on every single life that we save or even improve. We can't save them all, but for every individual of any species, relief from suffering is priceless. And I agree with that entirely.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very well
I
said.
do too. Yeah, beautifully put. And to that point, so maybe 15 years ago, one of the things which Compassion started to do, which I wanted us to do as an organization, was we started to connect with corporates. We started to engage with corporates, to press them with the carrot and the stick, to make game-changing commitments. For example, to have no more caged eggs on their shelves anywhere in their supply chains. And what's been great about that move is that we've been able to work with more than 1,000 companies far and wide in the UK, Europe, China, US, and beyond. And we can add up the number of animals that are now benefiting or set to benefit from those commitments, and it comes to 2.5 billion, 2.5 million animals every year are living better lives than if we hadn't started that program.
Fantastic. Wonderful.
Incredible. What an achievement. Let me add something to the stream. This is from Jane Goodall. I think it's beautiful. And kind
Jane,
of relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, Jane is such an inspiration and an insight. And one of the things which I really love about Jane is that she talks about human intellect rather than intelligence. After all, if we were intelligent as a species, why are we destroying our only home, the planet Earth?
Yeah.
So she talks about human intellect and how that needs to evolve into an intelligence, and then she goes on to describe that intelligence will need an approach which is both head and heart together. So it's folding intellect with compassion, and that is the meaning of true intelligence.
Yeah,
and I think that's so wonderful.
Yeah, wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
It really is. I wonder what you see as what do you hope for in the future? I'd love to just ask both of you, and again, for you folks watching, and obviously I know that there's the nirvana, but let's aiming at some short-term goals that we can achieve through compassion and a deeper understanding of each other and of animals and of the needless suffering that happens. What are some short-term goals we hope to see? Some short-term victories that we hope to see. I'll start because I know one that, and I kind of touched upon it briefly earlier on. I believe that, again, that point I made about then they fight you, then you win. The trophy hunting. I've never seen any vitriol like it as we're seeing from the hunting community right now, and that to me suggests that it knows it's in its death throes. And I think in the space of our lifetime, and I don't think it's over ambitious and optimistic to say that. I think we may very well see an end to that. And I know that there's a lot of talk out there about there needs to be, from the pro hunting lobby, of course, there needs to be an alternative in place prior to that happening. But I don't think that's the case. I think that alternatives are in place and that they're choosing to ignore them, and that it's demonstrable in various different places where community-led. So talking about Peter's point earlier on about compassion involving humans too. People and animals are benefiting alike in areas that trophy hunting isn't happening. So I see that as being a victory that we can focus our attention on, and it isn't on the far horizon. It's coming closer and closer. What do you gentlemen see as something that you think is a victory that we can achieve?
Well, one thing that I think that impresses me hugely since I have become very deeply involved with the plant-based movement is the wonderful commitment from so many young people. They are so well informed, and they have a developed compassion that I admire hugely. That's one thing. But what I would hope for is that a lot of perhaps more mature people, older people like me, would just cut down on the amount of meat they eat, so that they just give the animals the benefit of the doubt and stop contributing to the slaughter. And even if it means they, like Paul McCartney tried to start, meat-free Mondays or whatever. Think of the amazing change in the world it would make if all carnivores gave up 50% of their meat on a weekly basis forever. I mean, the amount of animals that would save, how quickly the soil would improve. So this is in the territory of the perfect, not being destroyed by the possible, because there is a big arc for people to kind of follow. And so I would just encourage everyone who is even thinking about it just to give it a try, because the alternatives are so exciting and so much more humane.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that there are, as well as the personal choices that we can all make to choose more plants, to eat more plants in our own dietary behaviors, there are real tangible things. I know we were talking about the frustrations of this government backing away from its manifesto pledge in the UK to ban live exports, but nevertheless, compared with live exports when I first started in this, way back in the 90s, I started with Compassion in 1990. In those days, we were exporting 2.5 million sheep, lambs, and calves from Britain alone to the European continent. Now it is a relative trickle. It's just tens of thousands. Now, that's tens of thousands too many. But what that shows is that all that stuff that they said 30 years ago about live exports being necessary and what have you, in this age of refrigerated lorries, is absolutely totally unnecessary. So there is no excuse. The government needs to get on and do it, and I think they will, but we need to push them hard. On top of that, I've already mentioned that the European Commission itself has pledged to ban all cages for animals farmed for food. And once you start to get rid of cages, there's a different mentality starts to come in. And I think that we've already mentioned the central role that factory farming plays in driving wildlife declines, in undermining food supplies, in being integral to climate change, what this will mean, and undermining the soils on which we all depend. All this will mean that big change will come. The current industrial factory farm paradigm is unraveling before our very eyes, and I think that will only speed up. And with it will change our eating habits. not only plant-based, but also the rise of things like cultivated meat. So meat from stem cells where there's no animal slaughter, a fraction of the greenhouse gases and the land requirement. And if you like, that will be, to my mind, the renewable energy equivalent of food. If for people who want to continue to eat meat, here is meat without the downsides.
Absolutely.
And that is, I was in a room only yesterday with some of the leading innovators, Mark Post from the Netherlands, who of course revealed one of the first cultivated meat hamburgers 10 years ago. The cost and the practicality of it is moving a pace. So I do think that there is big change coming. There's a lot of reasons for us to be positive, to stay determined and make it happen.
I agree wholeheartedly. I would also say, folks, just to bring this right around to the subject of this evening, which is compassion and creating a more compassionate world. Everything we're talking about and everything we could talk about in terms of the achievements, the victories we hope for, the victories we've already seen, the things we can celebrate, happened because of compassion. Every single one of them. Because everything we're talking about, whether it's the bears in the bear bile farming industry, or the animals in the agricultural industry, the animal agriculture, and the lions that Born Free look after, or the dogs that are the strays that people are rescuing, just like Peter's own rescues. No one's getting a thank you or expecting a thank you from those animals. It's a reward is the love and the compassion. See, he's agreeing.
People are agreeing.
That's it's in and of itself. It is the reward, and
It is, yeah.
I think it's something that one thing that I know that sounds overly simplified, like I'm oversimplifying it, but I think is really important to know in terms of what we can all do and how we can help, is to be this, to live from this, to literally ensure that the foundation of everything you do is a foundation of love and compassion. And living from that place rubs off on people. It's not preaching, and of course there's a place for that too. There's a place for demonstrations. There's a place for campaigns. But I really believe there's such enormous power in just being love and compassion.
Mm.
And really, we all know that feeling, and it is a feeling. And it's sometimes, and I think this also comes back around to that point, or the question that was asked around how do you get past feeling overwhelmed and the feeling that you need to give up sometimes. And this is perhaps it as well, because I keep using quotes tonight, don't I? But that was that beautiful quote by Martin Luther King about hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.
Yeah.
It's so true, because if you feel that pain, if you feel the anxiety and the desperation of the insurmountable task that seems to be facing us with regards to animal welfare and conservation, here's a piece of advice that you won't hear from many people, and it's one that I apply myself a lot, and it isn't easy. But I'm telling you right now, it's important and it's effective, because it's true processing of the emotions. Is let it be, feel it. I'm not saying let it be and accept it for the rest of your life, but I'm saying sit with that pain. Breathe in and breathe out. And you can do this. Breathe in and breathe out and accept that pain as your temporary reality. And if you can, and this is more challenging, actually embrace that pain. And the reason I say that is possible is because it is the fuel. It literally is the fuel that keeps us going. It's like Peter said about, he thinks when he's in that state of depression and despair because of all the suffering that's happening that he's well aware of, he'll sit and think about the animals that are in a worse state than he is. And that's his fuel to get back up on his feet and keep fighting the good fight. And we can all do that. And it might sound counterintuitive, because our instincts are to just get rid of pain, to fight it, to distract from it, to do anything other than face it. But I'm telling you, the power is in sitting with it and allowing it to be and accepting it. And if you can, embrace it, and then let it be the fuel that drives you to keep on fighting. And it reminds me of another, again, I'm just throwing quotes around left, right, and center tonight, but one beautiful quote that I heard recently is, if your heart is broken, cry, forgive, heal, and let the tears of your pain water the flowers of your future happiness. It's that, and apply it to whatever you want. And in this case, animal welfare and conservation, it can be the fuel, or it can be the water that helps the seeds of happiness grow in the future. I'm just conscious we have 5 minutes left. And with that, I wondered if you guys have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with people, or with each other, as I look at the comments and see if there's anything that people are asking.
Well, I mean, I think we've touched on such important issues already, and what is absolutely clear is the central note of compassion, kindness, empathy, commitment. Those are the driving elements of everything that we do, and I think that those have been really very, very sensitively and clearly articulated in the conversation we've all had.
Yeah, and I there's just one story I want to very briefly just share with you. I shared it with folks in Brussels at the Animal Welfare Federation meeting, and it was I told them a little known fact about me was that in the 1990s I was a volunteer ambulance driver for a wildlife rehabilitation centre on the south coast here. South coast of England, and one day I was called out to pick up a kestrel, one of these beautiful falcons that hover. Only this kestrel was not hovering anymore because he'd had a calamity and his wing was a real mess. So I picked the beautiful bird up and I put him in the ambulance, took him back to the rehab, and he spent a few weeks there. And then they said, "Come and get him. You need to take him back to where he was and let him go." And I held this beautiful bird and I willed him. And I looked into his eyes and he opened his wings and then just flopped to the floor. And my heart went with him. And he just dropped to the floor, and then he ran off, which made it even worse because I had to run after him and grab him before I lost him and a fox had him or something like this. So, but I managed to get him back, took him back to the center, and he was there for another few weeks. And then a call came, "Will you come and get him and take him back to and release him? But if he doesn't go this time, that's it." So I took him back. And I looked into his eyes, and all of my hope and all of my empathy and willing, I breathed into him, and he opened his wings and just left my hands, and then he dropped almost to the floor. And again, my heart plummeted with him, and I thought, that is it. This is not going to end well. But then suddenly the wind got under him, and then he was in front of my face, and then he was flying above me, and then he was up, and he was above the trees, and then he went, and he just went, and my heart sang, and I don't mind telling you, I cried.
I bet.
Happy tears. And with that beautiful bird went my sense of a positive future for all animals. I knew that he was back where he belonged, and I believe that's really how we are as animal friends, as animal advocates. We come up against challenges time and time again. Things look bad. Things look like it's not going to happen. Things look like it's not going to end well. But we keep going, and we win new victories. We reach new heights, and we allow animals to spread their wings, metaphorically or really, and take flight.
Absolutely.
That is all bringing about compassion.
That sums it up beautifully, Philip. It really does. That's wonderful. And also, in terms of compassion fatigue or stuff, that sort of thing, a conversation like this and being in your company is such a recharger of all of our batteries in our compassionate area. It's been a great, great pleasure to be with you both tonight. It's been fantastic.
It's been amazing. Peter, Dan, sincere thanks. Oh, Dan, I think you're on mute.
I want to say I had to mute myself because I was snivelling at your story there. I want to say thank you to both of you guys. It's been an honor, and to share this space and this time with you. You guys light the way for the rest of us to follow. Please understand that that's what you do for us, because you really do, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. For the folks watching, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your interaction, your questions, and it's been an honor to host you. And with a big goodbye from Peter's Rescue Dog, which is as apt as it could possibly be, and brings a bit of a happy note to the final message. Thank you all so much, and we will see you again very, very shortly.
Wonderful.
Good night.